Can you tell me where? Sarah Guttel, I don't think I've met you either.
Hey, Luz. We've met very briefly. I'm on the One Love Global team with Angela.
Yes, okay, yes, yes.
Good
yes,
morning.
Yes, yes. Okay, I think we're ready.
All right.
So Gail, you want to do your brief welcome and on the agenda, we have you going over, doing a brief overview on the framework.
All right. Well, first of all, let me welcome everyone and thank you so much for being part of this core effort. We are certainly leveraging hope at a time when hope is sorely needed in this country. Part of the driving force, the foundation of our work, is this comprehensive framework to help us achieve racial equity and racial justice in this country. And after decades of dealing with the consequences of racism, we recognize that we've got to get rid of racism itself. And so we all have exciting efforts going on. Some are dealing with racism itself, some are dealing with the consequences of racism. But we do want to remain reminded that multiple approaches are needed in order, and they must be sustained through collective action, through legislative change, through policy change. But we always want to remember what we're changing, which is transforming this country's basic cultural ethos from one that's based on human value hierarchy to one that's grounded in our capacity to value each other equally. And that means changing our narrative about who we were and who we are and who we want to become. And so the first pillar of this framework for truth, racial healing, and transformation is narrative change. And there are many different ways to go about that. But in this era of social media, we are extremely challenged to do it and do it effectively, locally and nationally. The second pillar of this framework, TRHT, is what we call racial healing and relationship building, recognizing that we need a critical mass of people who understand the truth of our nation's history and are willing to work side by side in solidarity to build quite honestly, the votes that we need in order to sustain progressive policies and leadership. But then we have to really address the structural underpinnings of racism. And we know that one way to do that is to answer the question, how was racism sustained for so long? And one is through structures of separation and inequity. And there are many, you could list them all, through structures of a legal system that's designed to maintain racial hierarchy. And that includes many things: immigration policy, governance policies, access to votes, the list goes on, access to representation in the legal system, the policing system. And then finally, we know that our economy has been fueled by adherence to this false ideology of a hierarchy of human value. I share this framework briefly with you because we do have a set of policy briefs that we produced in partnership with APHA and the Beaumont Foundation last year, and they're called Healing Through Policy. And what we did was curate the myriad practices and policies that local groups like yourselves are putting in place throughout the United States. And so we want you to see that set of briefs as a resource to complement the work that we're doing on data and information and research. And in some ways, the narrative work is really propelled by using data effectively and creatively to show people the inequities and to track and hold people accountable, for the progress. And that's what the Hope Data System is about. So I just wanted to take a moment and share with you sort of the backdrop underpinning of our work in multiple ways and how it all intersects to help us work to eliminate racism and achieve health equity. And I will turn it over to Yvette.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for using the chat. Lou's placed in the chat that we will be doing our welcome and our introductions there to save time for our presenters. So thank you to everyone who has already started to introduce themselves in the chat. going to take a moment to go through our agenda at a high level for you. So we are doing our welcome and introductions. In a moment, after I finish this overview, Luz is going to discuss the Leveraging Hope team expectations. Then we will have our presentations by Neshoba Youth Coalition in Philadelphia, Mississippi, and One Love Global in Lansing, Michigan. We'll have time after each presentation for some Q&A, and then we will go into breakout groups. In our breakout groups, we will be discussing 2 specific questions based on our presentations, how the data, around data, and I'll get into that a little bit more specifically before we go on our breakout groups. And then we'll come out of our breakout groups, we'll have a report out from each group, and then we'll discuss, sort of have our reflection, and we'll close as we prepare to end this meeting and then get ready for our June presentation. Luz,
Thank you, Yvette.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Yvette. So just a quick overview. We go through this at all of our meetings just to refresh on why we're doing this work and what the expectations are for the presentations. So you're going to hone into one local focus area of policy work for this effort, figure out which data sources help your organization to create the most compelling narrative for change to increase health equity, identify and create a goal for progress that has a strong data-driven rationale, and of course, quantify your distance to goal for population groups in a specific geographic area. So that's what we're hoping to capture and learn from in the presentations as we go forward. So I won't take much of your time since we want to make sure our teams have enough time to present. I am going to pass it on to Bethlehem to give you a little housekeeping reminders. Bethlehem.
Sure. So I will be giving a 1-minute warning at 19 minutes for each presentation. So you'll hear a little bell ding, which I'll play. And then I'll sound an alarm for the 20-minute mark. So that can give us time for the presentations and then 5 minutes for Q&A for each presentation. And I'll pass it back to Yvette.
All right. I am going to and have the distinct pleasure of, I'm going to stop my share. Mr. Leroy, you can go ahead and share your slides, of introducing Leroy Clemens with Neshoba Youth Coalition. He will be our first presenter for today. We thank you very much, Mr. Leroy, for your presentation, and we look forward to all that you will share about COVID recovery and data in Philadelphia, Mississippi.
Thank you so much, Bravette, and thank you, guys. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about the Neshoba Youth Coalition, something that is near and dear to my heart and that I have been associated with since the founding of the group in 2010. Just a little backdrop about the Neshoba Youth Coalition. We were formed in response to our county's high teen pregnancy rate in 2009. We were number 10 in the state for teen pregnancy. Our school district that you see that I've got on the screen is the Philadelphia High School, which is our target demographic school district because it is 80% African-American school district. And in 2009, in that particular year, there's 1,200 students in the entire school district. I mean, from pre-K through 12th grade. We have 20.
Leroy, I'm sorry
can't
to
see your
interrupt
slides
you.
yet.
We're not seeing your presentation. If you can pull it up, share it.
Okay, I thought I was. Okay, hang on. Let's try it again. And show. This will stop at a certain. Do you want to continue? Yes. All right. What about now?
It's starting to go.
Okay. All right. Everybody, can you see me now?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So as I was saying, the Philadelphia School District is the school that we targeted in Neshoba County because of the demographic makeup of the school district, which is 80% African-American. And in 2009, that particular school district that has 1,200 students from pre-K through 12th grade. And in 2009, we had 25 girls pregnant in the school district in in that year, and that was ranging from grade 7 through 12, where we had those girls that were pregnant. So the students from the school district are the ones who came together and said, we need to do something. We want to organize and form an organization to do something about the high teen pregnancy rate in Neshoba County. And so that's how the Neshoba Youth Coalition ended up being formed. Moving on to the HOPE data, one of the things that we look at socioeconomic factors, Mississippi is number 47 in the state, in the country. And we wanted to target in the state indicators, we wanted to look at youth in school or working. And the reason why we wanted to focus on that, because we know that teen pregnancy and other things are happening because of poverty. And poverty, one of the ways that you address poverty is through education. And so if we can keep these students in school or either working, we can help move the state forward and get us out of this poverty situation, which is creating the teen pregnancy, the high school dropout rates, the crime, the increased crime in our communities. And we can help alleviate a lot of the adverse effects that's happening in the state of Mississippi. So we know that the state rate of Mississippi of school, young people in school or working is 83%. The HOPE goal is 100%, which we feel is obtainable. We don't see a problem with that. We think we can accomplish that. Just looking at the distance to go, in Neshoba County, for instance, we know that African Americans are 66%, away from so they are 66 African Americans, 79%. The white Americans are 87%. So we know we got a little ways to go, and we know which demographics that we need to be targeting to try to move forward to reach that goal of 100%. So this data has been very helpful because it shows us where we need to start, and it gives us a good starting point. The problem that we had here in Neshoba County, as I said before, the Mississippi ranks was number 1 in teen pregnancy in 2009. Neshoba County, the county where Philadelphia is located, we were number 10 in the state for teen pregnancy rates between 2005 and 2009. That's not good being number 10 in the state that has the highest rate of teen pregnancy rates in the country. If you look at the cost that down there that's estimated, teen births in Neshoba County cost taxpayers approximately $2.9 million basically a year in 2009. And overall for the state of Mississippi, it was $155 million in 2009. So we knew that if we could affect teen birth rates in Neshoba County and also affect it and make it work in Neshoba County, we knew it could work all over the state. And we sort of took that idea away from Freedom Summer and doing Freedom Summer in 1964. When they came into Mississippi, one of the organizers, I had a conversation with him. He said, I asked him, why did they choose Mississippi? And he said that Mississippi, it had one of the worst racist problems in the country. And they felt like if they could change Mississippi, they could change any place in the union. And so that's the way we sort of approach teen pregnancy. If we could affect teen pregnancy rates in Neshoba County, we felt like we could do it anywhere in the country. This is just a little opportunity lost. What we say, looked at what we could afford in Neshoba County if we just affected teen pregnancy, got the rates to go down. We could afford a pre-K for 794 children. That would cover every child in Neshoba County. We could pay for 2-year college tuition for 1,623 students. That would cover every student that graduates every year in Neshoba County. 4-year college tuition for 606 students. That would cover every student that graduated in Neshoba County every year. We could hire 93 policemen. That would double the number of policemen we have in the entire county. 51 registered nurses, and even be able to afford 70 teachers if we could just affect the teen pregnancy rate in Neshoba County. And so that was some of the things some of the data that we were able to collect. We know we have a problem, and here's what we came up as a solution. One of the reasons why we come together is we can help you as young people learn how to empower yourself. The Neshoba Youth Coalition is a youth leadership program designed for 8 through 12 graders, designed to teach them critical thinking and leadership skills. the group was founded in 2010 by two young students who had attended the Summer Youth Institute at the University of Mississippi. So they came back with an idea to form a group that later became known as the Neshoba Youth Coalition. And that was one of the things that we went after to address first was teenage pregnancy and high school dropout. At that time, when they began in 2010, there were 25 young ladies in the school district that were pregnant at that time.
In our town, there was not much for youth to do. There weren't any constructive programs for them to be involved in after school. So we decided that we needed to come up with something, that they could do and that could help promote their well-being, whether it was intelligence or just give them something to do. And we got together and we talked about everything, not limited to race, but it's focused around race that we experienced in our town.
The first meeting, we only had like 5 people to come. So then we just kept it going and kept it going. And eventually it got bigger over the years. And in 2011, we probably had maybe like 30 to 40 people show up.
The way we teach leadership skills and critical thinking skills to the students is through a process that we call the ABCs of community building, which deals with addressing their attitudes, their behaviors, and the conditions that they eventually end up having to go back to every day. If you want to change the community, you got to do 4 things. You got to make the case for the change. You got to build a base. You got to develop the leaders, and then you take collective action. If we're going to change our state, our country, we got to have leaders. And leaders are not born, they are developed.
What I like about NYC is that we can learn how to better ourselves, become better leaders, and learn from our history.
I come to NYC because it gives me a new perspective on life. It opens my eyes up to things that I didn't know before.
What's important is learning new things to better yourself for your future and learning about your history so you won't repeat it.
So the Youth Coalition, like I said, was formed in 2010. This is some of the media coverage that we have garnered over throughout the years. This is one of our first media coverage when they came in and gave us a full page ad in the paper. And this is just a few of the things that the coalition had done throughout the years. You'll see one of the groups there where we had also a drama team that they learned about the history of Neshoba County and they performed it in the state history competition and they had an opportunity to advance to go to DC to compete in the national history competition where they placed number 11th out of 500 teams. This is talking about where the young lady talked about the coalition started off with 5 members. In 2017, we were up to 75 members in the Youth Coalition. These are all students from all over the county of diverse makeup, Black, white, and Native American that participated in the organization. Here is talking about our graduation rate. We saw a tremendous increase in our graduation rate. We went from 78.1% to 90.3%, which was the 11th highest in the state of Mississippi. And this was done from 2010 to 2017. Here's some of the news coverage that we garnered about our teen pregnancy efforts.
Statistics show a decrease in teen pregnancy and high school dropout rates in Neshoba County over the past few years. Philadelphia Bureau reporter Lindsay Jennings spoke with the youth director about what he thinks is responsible for that decline.
This has always been my favorite pages is what success. This is what success looks like to us.
Leroy Clemens, director of the Neshoba Youth Coalition, flipping through the pages of children's accomplishments.
We use leadership as the premise to teach them about history, teen pregnancy, and high school dropout, and how those things affect their life and move forward.
The coalition started in 2010. According to Kids Count Data Center, that year, high school dropout rates were at 17.8% in the county. That number has decreased to 13% for 2016. Kids Count also shows about a 35% decrease in teen pregnancy among non-whites from 2010 to 2014.
When you come into Neshoba County, you don't find our young people engaged in a lot mischievous stuff because we hold them accountable for their actions.
Clemens says the Youth Coalition starts children at a young age by mentoring kindergarten through 8th graders in education during the summer months. And ages 14 through 18 students are mentored weekly after school on things like behavior and attitude.
We make sure that our program is consistent. We meet every Wednesday at 5:30, regardless, rain, sleet, snow, it doesn't matter. We're going to meet because they need that.
Lindsay Jennings, New Century 11.
Students ages 14 through 18 are welcome to join the Neshoba Youth Coalition on Wednesday nights at 5:30. The center is on 907 NLK Drive in Philadelphia.
So this is moving on. This is statistics showing the teen pregnancy rate in Neshoba County, Mississippi, before the Youth Coalition. This is some years from 2000 to 2009, and as you can see, the African American teen pregnancy rate was the highest in the county. The average there was for the state of Mississippi, and then the green on the bottom was the average teen pregnancy rate for white teens in Neshoba County. And this was prior to the forming of the Neshoba Youth Coalition. I'm going to move on to the next screen. This is teen pregnancy now in Neshoba County. And as you can see, the African American teen pregnancy rate, which is our target demographics, is now the lowest in Neshoba County and way below the state average for teen pregnancy. Now, and there are reasons why we chose to go after teen pregnancy. And also because, when you look at the Black population in Mississippi has the highest rate of infant mortality and low birth weights in the state. And Mississippi has some of the highest rates of premature mortality and infant mortality and low birth weights ranked amongst the country in the country. So we know that if we can deal with teen pregnancy in Neshoba County, and if we can reduce those numbers, we can also reduce the high rates of premature mortality, infant mortality, and low birth rates, because most of that is coming from our teens, and that's teens that's 17 to 19 years old. At what we've been able to identify, that a lot of this is because of the age of the students that are getting pregnant, and the fact that they don't have access to adequate health care in a lot of the areas in Mississippi, because most of Mississippi is so rural. So it's really difficult to get good health care if you're a teenager that's pregnant living in one of these rural areas. So if we can reduce the number of teens getting pregnant, we can really affect more than just how many of them going to school, but we can affect more than one particular state indicator in the HOPE data. This is she talked a little bit about our choice program. This is the program that where we have our students that we mentor students during the summer. It's a skill building program for K through 8th graders, where the student mentors, as part of the Neshoba Youth Coalition program, come in and they mentor students in math, reading comprehension, and vocabulary. And I'm gonna let the students tell you a little bit about the program itself.
One of the things I liked about the NYC Choice program is how the staff expected us to learn. No one said, you just knew because of the atmosphere in the room. Nobody was acting up or playing. Everywhere you look, people were working on assignments, and the program increased my confidence in math, reading, and reading comprehension. On May 26th, I will be graduating from Philadelphia High School, the salutatorian of my class. I will be attending Alcorn State University this fall to study political science.
What I like about the NYC Choice program was the math exercise and games. The student mentors made sure that everyone mastered the skills that we were working on each day. When you didn't get it, they would work with you one-on-one until you had mastered the skills, especially the multiplication phase. Everyone is expected to know all of the multiplication phase, because you never knew when Mr. Leroy would come by and quiz you. Everyone cared about us learning and made you want to please them by working hard to learn the things that they were teaching us every day. On May 26th, I'll be graduating from Philadelphia High School, number 3 in my class. I'll be attending Butte Community College in California this summer to achieve my academic and athletic.
Some of the things I learned about the NYC Choice program was the student mentors made learning fun. The staff were always encouraging us and teaching us new things. On May 26th, I will be graduating from Philadelphia High School. Number 10 in my class, I will be attending Jackson State in the fall. Thanks to NYC, I'm a team mother.
What I like about the NYC Choice program was how the student mentors made learning make sense to me. The way they would explain things made it easy for me to understand.
On May 26, 2022, I will be graduating from Philadelphia High School, number 28 in my class. I will be attending N1 Community College and learn about physical education.
What I liked about the NYC Choice Program was when we worked on reading and reading comprehension, they showed us how to read the passages in such a way that the story on the pages made sense and were easy to understand and remember. On May 26th, I'll be graduating from Philadelphia High School, number 21 in my class, and I'll be attending East Central Community College to study in computer engineering.
I will be graduating from Philadelphia High School, May 26, 2022, number 14 in my class. I will be attending East Mississippi Community College this fall. Thanks to NYC, I now have the knowledge and skills to make intelligent and informed decisions concerning my life.
NYC teaches us through the lenses of history, past and present, to ask critical questions concerning what happened to cause the conditions or environment to exist, why were the conditions or environment allowed to exist, and how do we work together to develop strategies that prevent these issues from happening again. On May 26th, I will be graduating from Philadelphia High School, number 13 in my class. I'll be attending Hines Community College this fall. One thing about NYC that I would like to give thanks to is helping me become a leader and do better in my community.
NYC's program focus on 3 core program areas: education, community outreach, and leadership. NYC's programs operate yearly from August to May. Youth participate in series of 35 leadership and historical dialogue sessions. They learn how to work with others, how to listen, how to examine political leadership discerningly, critical thinking, job readiness, and the importance of collaboration. After completing 10 months in leadership program, student leaders become eligible to participate in the education and community outreach portion of the program. I'll be graduating from Philadelphia High School for my class. I'll be attending Jackson State University this fall. Thanks to NYC, I now have the capacity to identify and address life's challenges and generate appropriate solutions. I am a statistic.
One of the things
one of the things that I always stress to the kids is it's not enough to just change their attitudes and behaviors. You have to empower them to change their environmental conditions as well, because just changing their attitudes and behavior, they're going back into the community or back into the environment, that's not designed to help move them forward. If we don't do something to change that environment, all the good work is just undone, and just a repeated process of over and over of them reverting back to the things that you have worked to move out of them and change them from. So, we really stress not only changing their attitudes and behavior, but making a difference in the environment, in the home lives, and making sure that their homes or situation and their environment is supportive of these students as they continue to strive to move forward in their lives. One of the things that I really want to stress here is the HOPE data is critical to us in what we're trying to do, because it helped us to be able to identify what are some of the areas that we need to target and work toward. Especially, like I said, we never thought about the looking into all the infant mortality. One of the things the kids talked about recently was that they want to start working on gun violence, looking at what has been happening in the country lately. We haven't had a lot of gun violence in our community, but we've had some incidents where it's all been teenagers, and they want to look at data as to what has been the effects of gun violence, what is the degree of gun violence in our community, what are the age of the children that's being affected. Is there something that we're doing or not doing that we can identify other areas using the HOPE data to leverage what we're already doing with teen pregnancy, and use that to leverage our work to start dealing with gun violence and youth crime and violence in communities. And we also want to look at moving that from a local leveraging the data to be able to say to other organizations or to state leaders, here's what's working in Neshoba County. This is a county that was number 10 in teen pregnancy in 2010. It's working in Neshoba County. Let's see if we can leverage and move it across the entire state of Mississippi. since we're number one in teen pregnancies, see if we can't do something that we can change and help bring healthy health outcomes to other counties in Mississippi, and maybe take it nationwide if we can make it work in Mississippi. So I'm looking forward to using the HOPE data and to identify key critical areas that we can really leverage into something bigger. And all of it is tied into health equity. So, you know, we're excited about the opportunity to work with the HOPE Institute, the HOPE data to improve health equity outcomes here in Neshoba County and the state of Mississippi. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Leroy, for your presentation. We have a couple of minutes for just some initial questions or comments from the participants on the call before we move into Ms. Angela's presentation. We just want to keep y'all on time, so we're going a little bit over. So if there are any burning comments or questions that we want to share with Mr. Leroy right now after his fantastic presentation. I honestly got emotional hearing the kids speak about, you know, seeing them in 4th grade and now they're going off to college. Never met these children, but started to tear up personally. So if there are any other comments from the audience, please feel free to type it in the chat or unmute yourself now so that we can share them with Mr. Leroy.
Hey, Leroy, Michael Scott, long time from the Kellogg Fellowship. Good to see your face and voice, hear your voice and see your presentation. I have a question real quick, and you don't have to answer now, but are you, as you shape these young people to not only have the outcomes you want, but clearly they're going to emerge as leaders, are you spending any time with them, teaching them about the responsibility as leaders that they will have in shaping the systems that they will, you know, hopefully contribute to shifting outcomes in, as well as the responsibilities that they have to grow up to be leaders? There clearly some impacts you're having on your goal, and I'm just curious about your system's impact and how you're thinking about relaying that to them as well.
Well, Michael, that is definitely embedded into our curriculum. Making sure that they understand the importance of leadership and how that leaders are the ones who set policy. And our whole, the intent of our program is not only to change minds and hearts, but to shift policy. And in order to do that, you have to have leaders who are trained and qualified and understand how systems work. And so we teach them about the systems that they navigate daily that perpetuate racism and the stereotypes and all the different things that they don't have to deal with. So they understand it. And many, as the young man that's this year that's graduating as the salutatorian of his class, he's going on to college because he wants to get into political science. He wants to become a politician. He wants to be a change maker. And so a lot of these kids are not only graduating from college, but they're also coming back and giving back to their community. We produce more than 14 teachers, local teachers, that are working in our school district right now that have graduated from our program and have come back to work in our school districts. So they are engaged locally and all over the state. Everywhere they go, they're making a difference.
We have a question from Mr. John Davis and then Ms. Sandra Chappelle.
Hi, I'm John Davis. I'm from Louisiana Center for Health Equity. Leroy, congratulations on the work that you've done. Obviously, you've made a difference. The question that I have is, how have you involved have you involved the parents? How has that had an effect on the success of the program also?
Very much so. The parents is at the center of everything that we do. One thing we learned, in order to engage parents, you have to engage the children. And so if you have the children doing things, so we do different things. Like I said, we have the drama team that performs during Black History Month. We have huge events where parents come and support the kids. At the end of our choice program, we have a graduation exercise where the parents are invited in. We also sponsor community events where we have the youth to invite their parents to come out. And every opportunity we get to engage the parents, that we call that as teachable moments. We have a chance to message to the parents about what the hopes and dreams are that we have for the community and how we want to move our community forward. So yes, we do engage the parents.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hi, Leroy. This is Sandra Chappelle from Cleveland. So I was interested to know, like, what is the context if kids said we need to work on teen pregnancy? So that's great. But I mean, how did you get them to that point? Was there some pre-work, some conversation? What led up to them identifying teen pregnancy as an issue for themselves? Because that's not generally how teens are looking at it.
Well, when you're in a small school district where you have 1,200 students, and in high school, that number is probably about 450. So when you got 25 girls in the school district that's pregnant, chances are that's someone that you know. And so they just saw it as an issue, and they were like, they came to me and said, Mr. Leroy, would you help us organize this and put it together? And so they were wanting to do this. I mean, these kids have always been community minded and focused and want to make differences. And so even now, when we have gun violence incidents in the city, the youth will come together and organize and go out and talk to the participants, because most of the time they're young people that they know, and they hold each other accountable for their actions. And so, and that's been the premise behind everything we've done. We don't teach abstinence. We don't teach just say no. We don't teach contraceptive. We teach critical thinking skills. What are the consequences for the actions and the decision that you're making? And so, and we use history, the incidents, events from history as the backdrop to teach them about what's going on in their community. Why is our community in certain areas in our community, why is poverty so high? You know, why does a young lady have 5 children and no husband? You know, ask the right questions. That's what we always say. Ask the right question. What happened?
Like public health. I appreciate this. Yes. That's the part that I was looking for. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you, Mr. Leroy, for your thoughtful answers. We will have time to discuss this some more in our breakout groups and our reflections. We're going to turn the floor over to Ms. Angela Austin with One Love Global from Lansing. Ms. Angela, you are able to share your slides if you have them now.
Thank you. Sarah's going to do the sharing for us. Thank you. I'd like to first start by thanking you for the time to share about One Love Global and our work and where we aspire to move with leveraging hope. I'd first like to just share that I'm fresh back from Buffalo and mourning our elders who were murdered mercilessly, and the 19 children who were murdered yesterday and the 2 teachers. Just want us to just pause for a minute and just sit with why we're doing what we're doing, and to remember that our impact is far beyond our communities and that we're all connected, and that our children and our elders deserve to be safe. One Love Global, our roots are in Detroit, Michigan. We started in 2004. We incorporated and began researching. We spent 4 years just trying to understand why our community, our schools, our systems, our health outcomes, why understanding what was driving the outcomes. We sat around and we talked about, what made the difference for us? How is it that we're here to have this conversation and so many of our peers and people that we grew up with are not here to have this conversation? And we determined that education was one of the biggest factors, and not education necessarily in the academic traditional sense, but the kind of education that comes from our families, from our communities, from understanding what's underneath the conditions, and how what people say about us and believe about us and what we see on our screens, even at that time, how it shapes what we believe about ourselves. And so we really just reflected on a scripture, as a man thinketh, so is he. And what is it that we think about ourselves, and how does that shape how we move in the world? And how does the world reinforce those false beliefs about ourselves? We spent 4 years just literally examining data to better understand why Detroit had more in common with developing countries than it did with its neighboring suburban community. And so we studied separation before we had language for separation. We looked at how communities were segregated and how that correlated with Black children living in poverty. And there were distinct correlations that just jumped off of the page as we studied this data over 4 years and began to hone in on our strategy to center Black children, to center peace, to center healing. And our language has changed over time as we've learned more about narrative, because that's really what it was, is what is the narrative that continues to reinforce the false beliefs about ourselves and that shapes the policy and systems. So One Love Global was envisioned as an organization that would not just look at the individual and how the individual is impacted and how the individual moves in the world, but how the organizations that deliver services do so in ways that either disrupt false narratives or that reinforce false narratives. Organizations that maintain the status quo of separation, or organizations that disrupt those status quos. And then ultimately, how are policies and systems continuing to reinforce those false beliefs, and how do our systems maintain segregation after centuries? And so that's really the root of our work and what drives our work. And we decided from the very beginning that children had to be at the center of our work. And so we've continued to move in that way. Next slide, please, Sarah. So situating our work in the context of leveraging hope and why we were invited to be a part of this team in this process. We started off in 2020, really just trying to understand what was happening with COVID. And this is before the data was widely available that showed the racial inequity. And so we just started with mapping news stories. What could the geography of how news stories were being reported and the correlations in those stories, because it wasn't just about the pandemic, it was how the pandemic surfaced inequities across systems, from access to healthcare, who was getting the right information, who was even getting the truth about how harmful and that COVID could be fatal, and realizing that information was not penetrating our communities intentionally. And so we began to see across communities correlations between COVID and violence, COVID and economics, COVID and immigration, just across the board, how COVID became a political weapon that actually made our communities much less safe, and ultimately increased the number of people who were sick, and ultimately our loved ones that we lost because they were not getting the right information at the right time from the right people. So that this mapping of the pandemic was twofold. One, it told us that we had to get our arms around our people in ways that we hadn't been able to previously. So as organizers, the limitations of boots on the ground and how do we, keep our arms around our kids, led us to actually hire youth to teach us what we needed to build for them to be engaged, what type of resources it would require, from the technology to, even understanding the limitations of broadband, and that we actually had to equip students with MiFi so that they could actually overcome even those structural limitations of not having access to the internet. So we moved with our youth, beginning with COVID, and also just naming that the pandemic coincided with a global reckoning of the delusion. I call it the delusion of white supremacy. This false belief in a human hierarchy is not an American ideal, it's global. And so really understanding why communities and people all around the world really resonated. Today is the second anniversary. And I hate to call it an anniversary, but 2 years ago today, a police officer knelt on George Floyd's neck. He took a knee on his neck until he was dead. And that catalyzed this global reckoning, this global demand for racial justice that coincided with a demand for COVID justice. Next slide, Sarah. That brought us, so we're focusing, like so many people, on where our youth, how is this going to affect them educationally, how the pandemic is disrupting their education, how do we make sure that they have the support and the resources that they need. And we were, prepared to celebrate the launch of this racial equity scorecard, which was something that we named as a goal for our Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation process, that we wanted to make sure that this data was disaggregated, that it was widely available, easy to understand, so that we could actually track the progress of our youth organizing and youth leadership work, not just in our organization, but what's happening across the community. How are systems moving? Are we actually moving the needle? And do we really understand what's behind the data? Do we understand what contributes to employment, youth employment? What contributes to youth graduation rates? What are the barriers? And I mean the structural barriers. Really looking at what is underneath it and how our systems and structures working together to create and reinforce the school to prison to pipeline. So this was one of our accomplishments from TRHT that we continue to build, and we are really looking at how the education data, the employment data, and we know that the failures in those systems creates huge risk and vulnerability for our children. Next slide, please, Sarah. So that brings us to our hope data. So we're coming into it just blown away at where Michigan is on health opportunity and equity. And as you can see, Michigan ranks the lowest, or is faring the worst, of all the domains in the community and safety factors. So we chose to go there. We don't do low-hanging fruit. So we want to go, well, not just that it's the worst, so let's focus there, but because we know that the failures in the other systems actually make our communities less safe and create those risk factors, and that there is strong correlation across those domains. So we see that 47% of Michigan adults are in very good or excellent health. How are the children? Our hope goal is 73% that Michigan adults will have very good or excellent health. And we see what our distance to the goal is. And so for us, we're looking at public health, looking at community and safety factors from a public health perspective, and all of those conditions that actually make communities safer. and drilling down further into that. Next slide, please, Sarah. So the community and safety factors that HOPE is looking at is low homicide, low physical assault, low poverty concentration, low robbery, and low sexual assault. One that interests us the most is low poverty concentration, because we know that there are direct correlations between community violence and economic mobility. And that communities that are safer have more people who are economically mobile, and there is less need and less presence of police in those communities. So we know what safe communities look like. How do we actually achieve them? And what are the indicators that may not be reflected that are actually a more direct relation to what makes people feel safe in their own communities? Yeah, you were right, Sarah, thank you. Move the next slide. So for looking at indicators in our own community, and one that I just really want to point out to you is that Black people are 14.2 times more likely than white people to be arrested for and charged in the case where the most serious offense was weapons related. Most of these cases involve guns. And so we're talking a lot about gun violence and the context of gun violence in an open carry, stand your ground state. Like, that's really important to understand, is that Michigan is open carry, stand your ground. It is not illegal for people to carry guns. Yet we see who is targeted for in random traffic stops. More Black people are more likely to be searched. And unfortunately, those encounters with police increase the likelihood that there will be an arrest, that there will be an injury. And unfortunately, in the case of Patrick Loyoya, that police encounter could lead to a fatality. And so for us in our community and our young people, we're really analyzing and understanding that communal violence, gun violence, and police violence all have the same roots. And it actually took our youth and the way that they perceive gun violence and the way that they perceive safety to really help us connect the dots and to begin to have a different conversation. When 36 people were murdered in our community, and most of those homicides were the result of gun violence. Of those victims, 9 were children, one as young as 3 years old. And what we desire is to understand what is at the root of the violence. Our children have helped us understand what they see. They see gun violence and police violence in a very connected way. Both involve guns. Police violence, in the sense of George Floyd, it didn't require a gun, but most often there is a gun involved. And so for youth to really examine the history of policing, the idea that police equals safety has been disrupted by our youth. And so them understanding and their analysis that police don't do their jobs, that they don't serve and protect our communities, that they often abuse their power when they encounter Black people. Understanding the correlations in their communities of school closures and how school closures actually create a vulnerable community, and how drugs and crime and violence become a part of a community that, when the school was open, was not present. So that defunding and divesting of that local community actually creates the conditions for violence. So children get it. They get it, and they need us to get it. When they say they don't feel safe in their neighborhood, it's not that they're expecting the police to come and be the savior. The disconnects between relationships, not knowing who's living among you, and even when you feel unsafe, to be afraid to call the police because it could actually create even less safe conditions. Not feeling safe in your community, not having a place to hang out. So their youth are understanding and analyzing that there's something underneath it. They see the symptoms in their community, in their fear, what's happening in school, what's in their neighborhood, just the transit between home and school, and understanding that there's something underneath it. So it's our job to actually help with the analysis, and to actually move our communities towards addressing the root causes. Next slide, please, Sarah. So we've spent 2 years, since we had to go virtual, we took full advantage of it, and we created something called the Lansing People's Assembly, which is where our community comes together and we really examine. We are grounded in the data. We're grounding ourselves in what the policy is and where it's failing us. And we examined and asked our community, what does safety mean to you? When you envision, and we literally had people just to close their eyes and to really imagine it, and what does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? And it feels like a stress-free and anxiety-free space to move. Our elders are protected, and they're protecting, they're respected and honored. People have their basic needs met. People are able to be their truest selves without fear of oppression and backlash. Communities where there's accountability, where we can actually name when something is not right. And our community comes together to hold our systems leaders accountable, and those leaders accept that accountability. Community safety is where there's low or no police contact. The safest communities have a police force, but it's not present and it's not visible. It's not profiling you as you move around your neighborhood. So the safest communities are not over policed. Children can play without fear. There's green spaces and parks and a very livable community. People know that they can get help when they need it, that there is compassion when people actually are in crisis, that the response to that crisis is a loving and caring response, and not one that is punitive and that has a carceral answer. When people are in need and have need for food and housing and financial security, that the response is not punitive because people don't have what they need. Next slide, Sarah. So the youth have really helped us prioritize because they name what matters to them. And for them, their priorities are education, justice. We had our youth sit us down and let us know that that they are targeted in school by teachers, by other students, that they feel intimidated. They're afraid of speaking up and speaking out for themselves because they fear retaliation. They want to see teachers that look like them, that care about them, that love them. They want safe communities, and that safety looks like an end to gender-based violence, that we're not blaming children and families for the conditions that they live in, that we are actually focusing on the systems and the systems leaders that continue to perpetuate policies and write new policies and fund harmful systems rather than investing in systems of care. We really have to acknowledge that when our children and families say that they don't trust the community system, legal systems. Thank you, Yvette, I see that, that we're actually responsive to that. So investing in environmental justice is something that has really been lifted up by youth, and that has really changed the way that we think about what community safety looks like. Next slide, please, Sarah. So this is a project that the youth did themselves and really helped us understand how powerful their voices are, the impact that they can have on driving community solutions. And our job is to invest in their organizing and their development. And so we'll share these slides so that you can see more of what we didn't get to cover. Next slide, please, Sarah. So I think we're wrapping up here. So these are the questions that youth, thank you, community safety. Questions that you've had that are driving why our priority is community safety. Thank you, Sarah. You can go to the next slide. So these are our priorities and how we're using data to transform safety. Defunding the police and investing money in the community, fighting for living wages, and making sure that we're investing the funds that are diverted into where our communities need them most. So there's two more slides. So transforming prosecution is a deep dive that we took with our prosecutor and where we actually got the data that we started with, understanding the power of prosecutors across both policing and across the courts, and that they actually have the ability to leverage policy in very transformative ways if we support them. So I'll close with saying that we won racism as a public health pandemic resolutions at our Lansing City Council level, at our Ingham County Board of Commissioners level, and through our organizing and collaboration with Black Lives Matter and NAACP of Michigan, we got the governor to issue a resolution as well. And our next step is a Breathe Act, because it's not just enough to form a committee. We want a Breathe Act that centers accountability, and the Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation Commission is one of the cornerstones of the Lansing Breathe Act and a Michigan Breathe Act. So that is where we're taking our data and how we will be transforming policy and setting really clear goals to achieve that distance to the goal for Michigan.
Wow.
Thank you very much, Ms. Angela, for your presentation. We have some time for some initial questions, comments, reflections on what was shared by the great work that's being done in Lansing and the Michigan area from One Love Global. Feel free to use the chat function or unmute yourself to have those questions, share those questions or comments with Ms. Angela.
Well, Angela, I just want to say that was so powerful. And one of the things that I take away from it is because here in Mississippi, because we are behind the rest of the nation in a lot of areas, when I see what's going on in Michigan, what it does is gives me a heads up to what is coming toward Mississippi. And so it gives us an opportunity to prepare. And when you're talking about the youth, talking about they're being afraid, of the police, they want safe communities. That's the same thing we want here in Mississippi. We haven't gotten to the point yet where the youth are afraid of the police, but I see that happening in some of the communities in Mississippi already. And so I'm really interested in seeing how you guys are dealing with it now, because that gives us an opportunity to learn from you to better prepare our communities for if it comes into Mississippi.
I appreciate that, Leroy. And I would, my gut is that it's there. And a lot of times our young people and adults, fear keeps people from speaking out. And because the retaliation is real, And we have seen the response from police to the policies, even that the prosecutor. So if police will come for the prosecutor, how are our children supposed to, not fear expressing themselves?
Mm.
Okay, y'all, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get ready to move into breakout sessions. Thank you again to our presenters. The presentations were phenomenal, and there are lots of similar posts in the chat with everyone sort of giving kudos to great presentations and thanking you for sharing your work. And I just want to reiterate and highlight those. So in our breakout group discussions, we schedule 15 minutes. It'll probably be a little bit less just so we can keep y'all on time today. But we want to discuss how the data issues that surfaced in the presentations could inform your work for an equitable recovery. And we also want to discuss ways you might use the data to drive action in your own local work. So we will be breaking out, I think we have Bethlehem, correct, or Maurice, correct me if I'm wrong, we have about 3 or 4 breakout groups. And so we will discuss those 2 questions, and some Leveraging Hope staff will be in the room just to kind of put the questions in the chat. We're not participating really. We want y'all to have collaborative conversations across localities to kind of discuss how the data issues that have surfaced inform your work for an equitable recovery, and also how they might help to drive action. So we're gonna go ahead, Maurice is gonna put us into breakout group soon. I think we'll have about 10 minutes for discussion, and then we will come back and report out and have some more discussion and reflection afterward. Any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or place them in the chat. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and start those breakout sessions now. I think we have everybody back from our breakout groups now. Thank you all for what I'm sure was rich discussions in our breakout groups. We have some time, about 7-ish minutes, to share any burning insights from our breakout groups. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen again. But while I'm doing that, if there are any comments from the chat or burning items that you'd like to share from the breakout groups, that would be great.
I don't mind going first. We, in my group, we had Karen from Connecticut, and it was very interesting for us. She started off by telling us that Connecticut determined that health equity and declared health equity, or basically inequity as a public health crisis. And so they're gathering data and trying to understand how to use those results to develop a very efficient strategic plan with goals, and having a racial equity commission to look at what's the road for, what's the path forward. And so that's what they want to use the data from their organization to do, or the data from the HOPE initiative to do.
I'll go second. Briefly, I think the thing that surfaced most in our group, and Alma, I forgot your last name now, but though we each had different focus areas, we really talked about what are the levers of change that are needed for the work that we're trying to drive in our own local communities. And it centered around the notion of shared values, collective will, and trust. And for us locally here in Greater Cleveland, the ability to look at non-traditional partners who have been a part of our old national collaborative / Place Matters community, and being able to then tap into non-traditional partners who are now looking at how to create economic justice in our community, and or who may have the data that we need to understand whether or not we are closing the distance, and using the HOPE domains and indicators as like, here's this is where we need to be, but what other things, what other data points maybe do we need to identify to help us know that we're moving towards goal? So I think that those were the main things: understanding levers of change, that shared values and collective will and trust, when and how to engage non-traditional partners or others in the work, and really staying true to this notion that we need to be able to measure the distance to our targets, you know, in terms of target indicators. I don't know, Alma, if you want to add anything else to that.
You did a great job covering it. Thank you.
I felt that your example, Sandra, on the non-traditional partners, like the Chamber of Commerce, was a very good example. So really, you know, opening up the window for greater impact and creating a collective effort across all the, you know, systems that could, you know, really support a distance to goal. You know, priority.
And the one thing I did mention that I wanted to share, and other people may not be having the same aha moment, and that is that a number of our partners really don't know how to use data to drive either discussion or planning. And so it is requiring us to kind of step back and build a little bit of muscle in that area as well.
Thank you. Any other sharing from the breakouts?
Yeah, this is Derek. I think we're going to hear a lot more about it. Looks like next meeting from Michael Scott, but he was in our group, and we in our group talked a lot about the need to that the data is really critical and helpful for credibility of the quantitative data, but really the tying this data into stories and narratives driven from the people themselves was a really crucial aspect of this. And the other piece we talked about is sometimes the governmental powers aren't necessarily receptive to hearing bad news or anything that's negative around their communities. So we talked a little bit about the challenges of having to kind of push back against when there's resistance to even acknowledging inequities because of tarnishing the image of a community to a political elected official.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment for Derek there, because what he said reminded me of a training that we had, I believe was, I don't know how many years ago, Gail, from the Opportunity Agenda, or either, I think it was Alan Jenkins. And that is making sure that we flipped kind of the script, even though these are negative things, but when you're presenting it to local leaders, to present it in a way that says that you can get the economic, get to economic goals or whatever, instead of making it negative, flip it and make it a positive kind of conversation. And that's always stuck with me, all of that communications training that we got from the National Collaborative back in the day. So if there's a way, Derek, for you to work with the local communities to figure out how to make it more of a positive discussion for whoever the local leaders are, I think that might be more effective.
Well, and if I could chime in, Leroy did that in part of his presentation about how if they stopped or reduced teen pregnancy, the opportunities that presented, right? In terms of more nurses, more doctors, more teachers. Yeah. Also, Mordecai in our breakout group, he talked about the business case for racial equity and how much money is there for Michigan. Mordecai, you want to weigh in and say a couple of things about that?
Yeah, I was sharing that oftentimes we have to, in certain circles we have to make the business case for racial equity. And one of the statistics that we threw out in our breakout session was that by 2050 our country stands to realize an $8 trillion gain in GDP by closing the racial equity gap.
Wow.
So rising tides raise all boats, as we said. So this is an hour problem, and this is not a day problem.
Thank you, Mordecai, for reminding us of that. And Gail, we have several national reports on racial equity business cases in different states, and we could put them in your resource portal so you can see the examples on how to make an opportunity case by inviting people that may feel resistance, make it an invitation, as Sandra pointed out, in a positive way.
I could use that. Thank you.
We'll make sure we put it in your portal.
We're at time, I think.
Yes, I think, yes.
We are at time. Thank you to everyone who stayed on. We literally are at 12:30, so we will not keep you anymore, but thank you to our presenters again. We're looking forward to our presentations June 23rd from Alma Stewart and Louisiana Center for Health Equity and Michael Scott and Equity Matters. We will be reaching out to you for volunteers for the July and August meetings. I think we have 4 teams left that need to present, so that will fit perfectly for those 2 meetings. And then just a reminder to send your photo release and photos to me via email. My email is there so that we can put them on our Leveraging Hope landing page. Thank you everyone for your participation today. This was a great, energizing meeting. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.